Almost relationships don't hurt because they ended. They hurt because they never fully existed. There is no dramatic breakup, no clear betrayal, no moment you can point to and say, that's where it died. Instead, there is ambiguity, and ambiguity is psychologically violent. You weren't rejected. You weren't chosen either. You were suspended in the middle, close enough to feel hope, far enough to question your worth. That middle space is where the real damage happens. Because the human brain does not handle almost well. It is wired for completion. When something remains unfinished, it doesn't fade. It loops. This is the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to obsess over incomplete experiences. An almost relationship is the perfect unfinished story. No label, no clarity, no final sentence. So your mind keeps trying to write one. You replay conversations in your head. You analyze tone shifts. You scroll through old messages looking for hidden meaning. You tell yourself you just want closure, just one honest explanation. But what you're really craving is relief from uncertainty. And uncertainty is addictive. Variable reward schedules, the same psychological mechanism used in casinos, creates stronger attachment than consistent rewards. When someone gives you affection unpredictably, your dopamine system lights up more intensely than it would with steady love. Intermittent reinforcement is powerful because it keeps you chasing the next hit. One warm message after days of silence feels euphoric. One vulnerable confession after emotional distance feels profound. The inconsistency amplifies the value. Your brain mistakes unpredictability for depth. This is why almost relationships can feel more intense than committed ones. There is tension, there is mystery, there is the constant question of, what are we? That question becomes the emotional engine, and engines don't run on peace, they run on friction. The anxiety becomes chemistry, the instability becomes passion. You start confusing activation with intimacy. Your nervous system doesn't recognize safety as exciting if it has been conditioned to equate love with uncertainty. If affection in your past was inconsistent, if you had to earn attention, prove your worth, decode moods, then an almost relationship feels familiar, and the familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. Hope plays a central role in this dynamic. Hope is intoxicating. It allows you to project potential onto someone who has not yet embodied it. You don't fall in love with who they are. You fall in love with who they could be. Potential becomes a fantasy canvas. Every small positive gesture becomes evidence that the future you imagined might finally materialize. The brain fills in gaps with idealization. And because the relationship never fully forms, it never has the chance to disappoint you in concrete ways. Reality remains abstract enough to protect the illusion. You are attached to possibility, not to presence. There is also an ego component that often goes unexamined. Being almost chosen creates a subtle wound. You are valuable enough to be kept close, but not valuable enough to be claimed. That ambiguity attacks identity. It forces you into comparison mode. You start asking what you lacked, what you did wrong, what you could have done differently. You personalize someone else's emotional unavailability. The brain prefers self-blame over uncertainty because self-blame creates a false sense of control. If it was your fault, then you can fix it. If it wasn't, then you have to accept that you invested in someone who never intended to meet you fully. That realization is more destabilizing. Almost relationships also offer a psychological shield. If it never becomes official, you can tell yourself you were never fully in. You can maintain the illusion of emotional independence. There is plausible deniability. We were never really together. That sentence protects you from the vulnerability of total commitment, but it also traps you in partial attachment. You give enough to feel bonded, but hold back enough to avoid full exposure. The result is emotional limbo, not secure, not detached, just suspended. And suspension exhausts the nervous system. When someone consistent enters your life after an almost relationship, it can feel underwhelming. Stability feels quiet. There is no guessing game, no adrenaline spike when a notification appears. Safety does not create the same dopamine surge as unpredictability. And if your body has learnt to equate intensity with love, calmness can register as boredom. This is one of the most painful cognitive dissonances people experience. Consciously, you say you want commitment. Subconsciously, your nervous system craves activation. Until that wiring is examined, you may continue mistaking anxiety for attraction. The absence of a clean ending is another reason almost relationships linger. Breakups provide narrative structure. There is a before and after. There is grief, anger, acceptance. With an almost relationship, there is only silence. Silence is psychologically corrosive because it offers no interpretation. You are left constructing meaning alone, and the stories we create in isolation tend to be harsher than reality. You imagine scenarios. You idealize what could have been. You romanticize moments that were, in truth, fragments. The brain dislikes open loops. It keeps returning to them, hoping to resolve them internally. There is also the dynamic of validation. When someone chooses you fully, it confirms worth. When someone keeps you in ambiguity, it keeps worth unstable. You may find yourself checking your phone, not because you miss them, but because you need proof that you still matter. Each message becomes evidence. Each delay becomes threat. Your emotional state becomes externally regulated. That is not love. That is dependency disguised as romance. And dependency thrives in unpredictability. Almost relationships often reveal attachment patterns. Anxious attachment gravitates toward inconsistency because it mirrors early relational dynamics. Avoidant attachment maintains ambiguity because it preserves distance. When these patterns meet, the result can be magnetic but destabilizing. The anxious partner chases clarity. The avoidant partner maintains vagueness. Both feel activated. Both feel misunderstood. And neither experiences secure intimacy. The pain feels personal, but it is patterned. What makes this especially difficult is that there is rarely a villain. The other person may not have intended harm. They may have been confused, emotionally limited, or unwilling to commit for reasons unrelated to you. But intention does not erase impact. Being kept in possibility without progression slowly erodes self-trust. You start doubting your perceptions. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Over time, this internal questioning becomes louder than your intuition. You silence red flags to preserve hope, and hope becomes the hook. The hardest realization is this: almost relationships do not end because they lack potential. They end because they lack alignment. Potential is theoretical. Alignment is practical. One is imagined, the other is demonstrated. If someone wants to build something real, their actions become consistent. Clarity emerges. Effort stabilizes. When those elements are missing, the relationship survives on tension, not intention. And tension cannot sustain intimacy. Letting go of an almost relationship requires grieving something that never fully happened. That grief can feel irrational. You might minimize it because it wasn't even official. But your nervous system does not care about labels. It responds to attachment. It responds to investment. You are not dramatic for feeling pain. You are human. However, healing begins when you separate intensity from compatibility. Just because something felt powerful does not mean it was healthy. Just because it was unfinished does not mean it was meant to be completed. The real work is internal. It involves asking why uncertainty felt magnetic. It involves noticing where you tolerated ambiguity to avoid deeper vulnerability. It involves rebuilding self-worth independent of someone else's inconsistent attention. When validation is internal, unpredictability loses its grip. When self-trust strengthens, ambiguity becomes unattractive rather than intoxicating. Almost relationships hurt because they expose wounds we didn't know were still open. They reveal how quickly we attach to potential, how deeply we fear not being chosen, and how easily we equate chaos with connection. But they also offer clarity. They show you what misalignment feels like. They show you the cost of staying in possibility too long. And if you are willing to look closely, they teach you that love is not supposed to feel like guessing. Real intimacy does not require decoding. It does not survive on breadcrumbs. It does not leave you suspended between hope and doubt. It feels grounded. It feels stable. It may not spike your adrenaline, but it quiets your nervous system. And quiet is not boring. Quiet is safe. Almost doesn't hurt because it ended. It hurts because you kept waiting for it to finally begin. And the moment you stop romanticizing uncertainty, you stop mistaking activation for affection. You begin choosing clarity over chaos. You begin recognizing that being almost chosen is not a compliment. It is a sign. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it.